How much more are you willing to spend on Cherry MX switches? The difference that you're about to see here is $40. I'm Rio Gion, and this is Rio Gion Keyboards. Both keyboards, in my personal humble opinion, screams pro gamer. Some might say that the Viper looks a little bit more office friendly, but let's be honest people, that braided cable and that red Viper logo screams gamer. And of course the GSkill is a fully decked out gaming keyboard, so it is proud that it is a gaming keyboard. There's no hiding that. And both keyboards, in terms of looks, there isn't a winner. They're both gaming keyboards, and if you don't like gaming keyboards, then go ahead and click away now. There's really no point of you watching it. But if you are in the market for a gaming keyboard and you don't want to spend the money on a Razer or a Corsair, and especially if you want to spend less money on a keyboard, then of course keep watching, as one uses authentic Cherry MX and the other uses KO. With the Cherry MX, it is a RGB Cherry, so the lighting is within the switch. While the KO, they have a LED just above the switch for the Viper V760. On the back of the board, the Viper will trump the GSkill because these rubber feet are very stable, and the flip up feet are also rubber, which means that the board will be planted no matter how you angled it. In terms of the GSkill, the flip up feet do not have rubber, so it will slide around all over the place. That is the downside to the GSkill. And the rubbers that are on the back are not as thick, but the board is planted, and overall they did a decent job there, but not as good as the Viper. The Viper really did a good job here. And where the Viper fails, in my opinion, is the cable design. Even though it's braided, it screams gamer, and I guess it's good. And at least you have gold USB tips. And it's interesting how it's green and orange on the inside, so that's pretty cool. But there is no label on them, so you can't tell which one is the keyboard and which one is just the pass-through. Now on the other hand, you have cable management Velcro, which is nice. I guess it can kind of made it up for that. While on the GSkill, it's very much a thicker cable here, and you actually get to know which USB is the keyboard and which USB is the pass-through, which is a great thing, especially when you're kind of stumbling around, you don't know which one's which. Just looking at the USB will really help out in those dire situations. A growing concern that I definitely noticed with RGB boards is the colors, especially whites and blues, or just whites in general. And both of the keyboards does a terrible job at white. The Viper white looks kind of like blue, and the GSkill white has red in it, which that's the first time I ever saw something like that. And in terms of purple, the Viper actually does a really good purple. I really noticed that, and it's quite nice, as in the standard color that I have been using for quite some time with the Viper. And for the GSkill, it does a terrible purple with green. Both of them are pretty okay with green. And then you have red and blue, which red, especially on the GSkill, looks really nice. Can't really say the same for the Viper though. Even though the logo is red, it seems like it would make sense if the red is really good, but it's not. It's a lot better on the GSkill. It is safe to say that both of the keycaps are equally horrible, with the Viper being scratchy caps that just come straight from the factory, already scratched, already damaged. And the one on the GSkill, the keycaps, the paint smeared, so they're both ABS. There's no one is better than the other, both are equally bad. There's no escaping it. And this is something that you're gonna have to deal with unless you want to pay an extra 40 or 50 bucks or however much you want to pay for better keycaps. The Viper uses the Coalstar stabilizer, which can be a little bit of a pain, but due to the open nature of the design of the keyboard, it's not going to be as painful as, let's say, something on a Razer board or a DOS keyboard or something with a closed enclosure where it's super hard to line up those stabilizer, while the GSkill has Cherry MX stabilizer, which means it's going to be a lot easier to clean the board. But if you want to clean the stabilizer, the Cherry MX is a complete nightmare because you're going to have to open up the board to get to the stabilizer, while on the Coalstar you can simply remove it. My own humble opinion, I would go with the Cherry MX stabilizer any day of the week over the Coalstar one. Just like the keycap, both of the wrist rests are terrible, but they are not equally terrible because the wrist rest on the GSkill is especially bad. The texture is not good, the placement is uneven, and the wrist rest that's on the Viper is magnetic. The texture is not as bad, but it's still hard plastic, which is a bad thing. And the wrist rest on the GSkill, it has those snap little plastic things that will break very easily. And overall, it's just avoid it like the plague, and also avoid the wrist rest of the Viper as well. But once again, it's ever so slightly better. Both the GSkill and the Viper are pretty fair in terms of software usability. Both are pretty user friendly, and especially for the GSkill with the updated software and how you can actually control the lights of the media keys, that's actually very greatly appreciated. And what I find lacking about the Viper is that there's only 6 profiles, which means that you are limited, while on the GSkill I believe that there's a lot more than 6, because from the time that I'm using the board I feel like there are just a lot more options with the GSkill. And speaking about options, you can also have a background light to go with your lighting effect, and I think that all RGB keyboards should have this feature because it just seems like it's a lot more intuitive than to have the keyboard be blank and then play out the lighting effects when you actually type or play games on it. While keyboards with a background light, it's set up towards whatever it is that your setup is, and then the effect starts playing and it seems like it's a lot better. Of course, I believe GSkill probably took a few notes from Corsair, because that's what I noticed with the Corsair boards, especially the K65. Way back when I did the review on that particular board, there was the background lighting and lighting effects, which is greatly appreciated. Now, in terms of the actual lighting, I believe that the Viper will outperform the GSkill in terms of the actual presentation of the lights when you physically see it, because the RGB Cherry MX switch is just not as bright, and also the GSkill, the board itself, the back plate is black, so the light wouldn't shine as brightly, while on the Viper the back plate is silver, so the lines and lights are gonna shine very brightly on the Viper. Then another pet peeve, or I guess you can say that I'm kind of nitpicking, that for the Viper, every single time when you select a setting, you have to click apply. It can be very annoying, but I don't want to take off points for the Viper just because I find it annoying. I want to take off points because there are features that are lacking on it instead of just things that I find annoying. And in terms of features, I really want them to do a software update where you can actually have background lighting and lighting effects. I think it's going to be a lot better. But then again, the Viper kind of made up for it with its sort of softwareless kind of feature, because you technically don't really need the software in order to access the lighting features. While on the GSkill, that's a must. If you do not install software, you will get very, very limited lighting features. And in terms of that, the Viper will win out the GSkill, but overall, I'm gonna give the GSkill the edge because there's just a lot more variety. And notice how you can add rows of lights, and just there's a lot more effects, and there's a lot more profiles to customize your RGB board. One of the basic fundamental thing about keyboards is typing. And if you do not enjoy typing, then a keyboard is not doing its job now, is it? Even though, of course, there are gaming keyboards out there that are keyboards marketed towards just gaming. But let's be honest, a keyboard is essentially made for typing. And this is where the GSkill absolutely destroy the Viper. When comparing it back to back with the Cherry MX and the KO Brown, the Cherry MX just overall feels so much more satisfying. The feel, the crispness, and just overall the will to type again is drastically higher than that of the KO Brown. But I can definitely understand for the ones that just experienced the KO Brown, they may want to defend it by saying, oh, KO Brown is just as good as Cherry MX. They are wrong. I'm just gonna flat out tell you now that they are wrong, and that Cherry MX will trump KO day after day after day, because the typing feel is just that much better in the GSkill. Overall, as a gaming keyboard, the GSkill does a much better job than the Viper because it has the bank of macro keys, which is excellent for those that love to play MMO. Not only that, there's 3 different memory settings, 3 on-the-fly profiles. There's just a lot more features for your money with the GSkill. Now, albeit you are paying more, you are paying $40 more, but the features are very much worth the price because it's very handy. As I heard, it's very handy for MMO players to have that bank of macro keys because there's a lot that's going on each and every time they go into a raid. Now, albeit I do not play MMOs at all, so this is just word of mouth, and a lot of MMO players find the bank of macro keys very, very useful. Now, if you don't play MMOs like me, the bank of macro keys may not be as useful to you because, of course, you don't really need it. And, of course, that's a different story aside. But if you do play MMOs, then the extra $40 for the bank of macro keys and 3 different memory settings might just be worth it. And besides that, the Viper pretty much has everything that the GSkill has, and this GSkill has even more features. And in terms of the Switch itself, MX Brown feels crispier, which in my own opinion it's more fun to play games on, because the KO Brown feels mushier, and it's that crispness that I really like when it comes to gameplay, because it just makes me feel a lot more engaging than, say, the mushiness of the KO Brown. But let's be honest here, people. Once again, as I said before, if you mainly play FPS like me, it's the mouse that's gonna really make the difference and not the keyboard. But if you play RTS, that's when the mouse and the keyboard is very useful, and that's when those bank of macro keys will very much prove themselves that they are worth the additional cash. The winner goes to the GSkill because it just does basically everything better than the Viper. The keyboard overall is more enjoyable. It has more features, albeit the wrist rest sucks. It's absolutely terrible. Do not use that wrist rest. Just, if you were to buy the keyboard, take the wrist rest, throw it away, that's alright. I would not blame you. Do not use the wrist rest. It sucks. And besides that, there are certain colors like purple and white that the keyboard just absolutely suck. I don't know how to say it. It's just not good. It is not good with purple. It is not good with white. But besides that, Cherry MX Brown in this particular application is so enjoyable. Like, I have improved work efficiency because of my will to continue typing the keyboard. That, to me, is a very, very good job. They have done a very good job here. Overall, despite its flaws, the extra $40 is well worth it.